All right, Bitcoin at around 107K, how XCN, XRP, IOTA, and a few other coins, XYO, will react. This is NC Hammer Crypto. My name's Neil. We keep technical analysis short and sweet. All right, let's get into it. So Bitcoin broke this downward trend line, which is very nice to see. We want to see it hold some support above that trend line. However, I do want to bring up that we had something similar back in the past right around here. This green box, we saw it broke this downward trend line, did not hold that as support, pushed under the 200 EMA, came back up, touched this downward trend line, got rejected even further. However, with that push down, ultimately got pushed back up over the 200 EMA and then over that downward trend line, having a continuation upwards, keeping in mind that it still had some major pullbacks after it had a major push up. So 10% down, but just from here up is 10% up. So you could get 10% in a day. These are in the 4-hour charts. So 10% and then reduce 10% back to that 200 EMA in the 4-hour and then pushed up massively. So that's kind of what we could expect with what we are looking at Bitcoin right now. We could see a rejection off of the 108 pushing below the 200 EMA, but that 200 EMA seems like some strong support. So it may not happen like it showed in the past where it had that major push down, back down to have a potential lower low around the 98,000, but ultimately getting support, pushing back over the black trend line and then going up from there, continuing the rest of the market. We are finishing up June. July is coming up here soon, halfway through the year, but a lot of this activity, I believe, will be continuing until November, whenever it starts to fickle out a little bit, maybe die down a little bit. But moving over to IOTX. IOTX still in a downward trend line, not holding above this upward black trend line, which is not looking the best. However, we could see a higher low here and pushing over that trend line and then holding over that 200 EMA. And we see that whenever it held over the 200 EMA, major push up, held over the 200 EMA, major push up, held over the 200 EMA, major push up. So pretty much we just need to get over that 200 EMA and this black trend line before looking for entry on a scalp trade to get a pretty quick percent. For example, this right here is 18%. Pretty massive push, but not the best entry point. You can see right here maybe forming that inverse head and shoulders. So the entry would be right around here, around 0.025. But we do want to see this push over the 200 EMA. Moving on to DNT. DNT trying to break this black downward trend line. When that does happen, we are going to see a major push upwards for DNT. It's only 2 cents right now, but earlier at the beginning of this year, it was all the way up at 8 cents. It's pretty massive profit, 4x, 400%. However, that's just the beginning. When we're looking at the bigger picture, moving out to the daily, we can see it's gotten a lot higher than that. I was in this area as well, selling out near the top around 16 cents before it had that major rejection, forming this black downward trend line. But when that breaks, we could see a major push up as we saw back here through, what was that, February of 2023 until October of 2023, and it didn't push until March of 2024. But that one push was a major percentage increase. So we could expect a similar outcome when it breaks this downward trend line to be pushing up at least to around 15 cents from 2 cents, the all-time high being a quarter. And typically when it hits all-time highs, it has a little bit of rejection, major support, and then breaks to a new all-time high. So keep DNT on your list, as well as BNT. BNT also forming downward channel, as you can see here. Downward channel, more or less, I guess. But what we want to see is hold this support around the 0.55, holding above the 200 EMA. Right now it's in consolidation, grabbing some money before either testing the low again and then holding support and pushing upwards, but also same with BNT and DNT. Looking at the bigger picture in the daily, you can see it has a very, very long way to be pushing upwards, all the way up around $10, I believe. Way back in the past, it started $10 all the way up to $20 for BNT. We are currently at 58 cents. So with that being said, keep DNT on your list. It does have a long way to go down to touch the 0.38. So if Bitcoin does drop massively, you could see a flash crash happening with BNT. But if it holds support and we get support on the daily above the 200 EMA, we could start seeing this head back upwards. This would be around the 50%, being the 0.63, and then potentially touching this downward trend line at 6.7. With that percent increase, you're looking at roughly 21%. So there are better coins. Ultimately, we want to see a break this downward trend line before getting a better entry for that push upwards. Moving over to the more important ones, XRP, XCN, XYO. XRP still in consolidation, looking very nice and healthy. Did get a rejection off this black trend line. However, we could see a smaller inverse head and shoulders potentially forming. If this gets a push back up and holds above that black trend line, we could see it pushing back up to 2.65. If it gets rejected, we may see a push down to 1.97, even lower at 1.75. I don't expect that to be happening for XRP, as there's a lot of positive news coming out for XRP in general, but definitely dollar cost average and stack your bag for this bull run for XRP. It will have a massive push upwards. Not financial advice, just previous knowledge in general. XCN had that push up above the downward wedge like we were looking for. It's holding above the 200 EMA and the downward wedge, using it as support as we saw over in QNT with a similar formation when it breaks the downward trend line. This black line right here being the downward trend line. You can see it pushed up over, came back down, used it as support, and now we just need to see a higher low for that QNT. So looking at XCN, pushed up over, came down, hopefully testing it as support. If that does not test as support and Bitcoin drops lower, which is a possibility, you could see it re-enter this wedge and potentially be using this black trend line right here as support again. And with that, it's just good news, because if it holds that as support, it shows that everybody is buying up right around here and does not want to see a lower price for XCN. And this is getting a very tight wedge, which it could have a continuation push for consolidation before pushing upwards. But XCN is only at a penny and a half and has a all-time high of, I believe, 18 cents, potentially a 43-cent price tag for XCN before ultimately crashing again. So that's kind of that for XCN. And XYO. XYO is still doing its wonky thing, doing a very long, exaggerated downward trend line, starting to build a little bit of support. As you see, it's holding off this black upward trend line as well as this downward trend line. We could see some consolidation, a quick rapid movement to the upside, as you saw right here back in the 21st of June, 22nd. But then pushing up towards that trend line from where we are currently at would be around a 25% increase. If that breaks, we have some fair value gap in this two dotted red line area, which is around a 50% increase for XYO. But if it breaks through that, we could see a massive pump on XYO, pushing it up to the 0.025. Beyond that, 0.04. And then zooming to the bigger picture on the daily, all the way up here to the around 8.3 cent mark. which is a pretty massive percent increase. Anyways, that's it for today. I always leave reference links in the links below for Grass token, free airdrop money, Coinbase, Mexilo's trading fee platform, and Roller Coin. I'll probably do a short on Roller Coin so you guys can see what it's about. But that's it. Good luck and have fun with it.